The meeting will be live in 3, 2, 1.
City Council Member Louis Vieira, Chair of the HART Board of Directors. Please silence all electronic devices for the duration of the meeting. Welcome to the March 27th, 2023 Special Board of Directors meeting, which is now called to order. The meeting format is hybrid with board members physically present at the HART Administrative Office, 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and participating via communication media technology. Please look to your screen of your devices where an image of the flag is displayed, and please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Attendance, please.
Chair Vieira.
Here.
Director Owen.
Here.
Director Williams.
Here.
Director Castor. Director Frazier. Director Hudson. Director Johnson.
Here.
Director Kemp.
Here.
Director Knight.
Here.
Director Myers.
Here.
Director Schisler.
Here.
Director Wolstel.
Here.
You do have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much, and we have Mr. Hudson here as well. It's fine. The rules for hybrid meeting participation are provided in the packet. Next is public input. The rules for public comment participation are included in your packets. There are people scheduled to speak in person and potentially online. Staff, please proceed in facilitating public comment.
Thank you, Chair. The first public comment was received via email. It is a written statement. If you'll just give me a moment for my timer. Alrighty. It reads, "Good morning, and thank you for allowing this to be read into the public record."
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Point of order, are we allowing, I have stated before that I really didn't think we should be reading.
I tend to
Comments.
agree, so long as, how many are there?
One.
Oh, okay, yeah, just for purpose today, but I'll reconsider it next meeting. Thank you. Point well made. Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to take a moment to speak about leadership. As it now seems you will be tasked with finding another CEO, there are a few things that I would like to ask the board to consider. Firstly, as I understand it, Ms. Legran was initially brought on to fix the failing HART leadership that was left in the wake of outgoing CEO Ben Limmer. What quickly followed was over 300 employees leaving the organization. I keep hearing the statement repeated that change is difficult and feathers will ultimately get ruffled. So I think it bears repeating that Ms. Legran was brought in to replace failing leadership, not a failing organization. In fact, the staff Ms. Legran inherited seemed to be succeeding despite failing leadership. Nonetheless, many were let go or felt forced to resign, which has resulted in HART now working with razor-thin crews. If you further look at the actual names of those who were forced out of HART under Ms. Legran, you will see the names of those who stood up against Mr. Limmer's unethical business practices, which makes one wonder if Ms. Legran's actual agenda was to protect herself by getting rid of any people who would dare to turn against a sitting CEO, or perhaps recompense for her former colleague and friend, Mr. Limmer. You may also remember that it was stated that at Ms. Legran's first meeting with senior level staff, she told them that they were backstabbers and needed to earn her trust. I won't continue to dwell on the past, but I think it is imperative that they all be remembered when selecting a new CEO. The reason being that it is believed by some that recent hires at HART are also people with whom Ms. Legran knew personally. And these are people who have shown her the utmost in loyalty and now hold senior level positions in HART. In selecting an interim CEO, it would be easy for the board to look at a person's current title alone and use that as a guide to who should take over the reins, but I implore you to look at the larger picture. What this organization desperately needs moving forward is a CEO whose loyalty is not to a single person, but whose loyalty lies with HART and the community they serve. There are other long-standing employees at HART at chief and director levels who have proven their loyalty to HART and could easily fulfill the role of interim CEO, and I would hope that they won't get overlooked. These are people who have pushed through poor leadership after poor leadership, coupled with financial constraints, and yet continue to provide customers with excellent service. These are people who do not lead by fear or secrecy and have respect for their fellow employees. The last thing HART needs right now is for Ms. Legran's one of Ms. LeGrand's hires to become interim CEO and have a repeat agenda. If so, we will find ourselves right back in the same position a few years from now. A few other unrelated questions in regards to the fiscal cliff. Can the CFO be asked to explain in detail what happened to the over $90 million of COVID relief funding they received? Also, and that's the end of that. The second and final speaker that I have pre-registered is Jesus Garcia, I believe his name is. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Charviera, board, Ms. LeGrand, fellow teammates and members of the public. My name is Jesus, HART staff. On Friday, when talking about the study to dissolve HART, a coworker asked, what put us in this position? In my opinion, three things: apathy, sabotage, and misinformation. Apathy. A sluggish board that asks for more details before making a decision. We produce 100-page agenda packets. What more information you need? You rather discuss what the tabloids are saying and postpone the important business. Which brings me to sabotage. Discussions you have here are largely based on gossip, either from tabloids or from a couple of angry people. None of us is perfect or is defined by the opinions of others, but we should be able to put our personal differences aside for the greater benefit of the agency and, more importantly, our customers. If you fire LeGrand, my fear is that other folks will also leave because they have been marked as allegiant to the enemy. Super unfortunate, since they are very talented and capable of helping HART steer away from this storm, which isn't unique. Do your own research. Others in the country are going through this. People are afraid of saying I don't know and of being held accountable. Workplace culture and congeniality are a two-way street. If LeGrand had something to hide, she would have run for the bushes months ago. Yet here she is, putting up with this media circus. Which brings me to misinformation. Many have no idea what it is we do here. Can the Times get over Terry Wright already? We paid Mr. Adams at least $30,000 to find out if there was any aiding and abetting. Let the man do his job. If LeGrand is found guilty of something egregious, then sure, let's move on without her. But the others stay. No witch hunt. We need them to rebuild, LeGrand or no LeGrand. TBARTA, created to to develop a vision for regionally integrated transportation, was just dissolved by the legislature. Now they're saying they want to explore dissolving HART to enhance regional transit in Tampa Bay. Which one is it? That's just proof they don't know what they're talking about. Explore all you want. I'll be the first to give you data, but don't cry me a river when you realize you paid a consultant thousands of dollars to prove that there's no point in dissolving HART and tweaking the current structure will suffice. Honestly, I expected the self-proclaimed budget gurus to sit down with our stretched-thin finance department and help us find more efficiencies. But steering problem is more fun. I recently read, buses are antiquated. Few understand that in a modern world, point-to-point transportation is the way. What few people understand, sir, is that how mass transit actually works. Well, wrapping up to our board, here's a quote: those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else here for public comment? Okay, great. And you know what, in the future, the emails, they are sent to us, or we could have them made available. Do we have to have them read during meetings? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Your policies do provide that they're supposed to be read into the
Okay, well,
record.
okay.
That being said, I mean, it's something you can revisit.
Okay, good, thank you. Yep, and we'll do that. Okay, great. So let's move forward next to number 3, action items, excuse me. The Finance and Audit Committee reviewed action items 3A and 3B and formed a consensus for the full Board of Directors to review and approve the item, but the board lost quorum and moved the items to this special meeting. So are there any questions or inquiries on item 5A, resolution number R20230307? 3A, I'm sorry. A, excuse me. Any questions? Thank you. Okay. Do we have any motions in this regard?
May I?
Yes, ma'am.
So this item 3A, if my memory serves me correctly, was asked for us to provide some additional information. Director Knight, did you receive that information that you requested for the liability insurance? Just want to make sure that you're comfortable with this one moving forward. Ms. Zickerfus, can you come and provide an overview on this one?
And beforehand, Board Member Knight, if you wanted to say something, you had your hand up, sir?
Yes,
Go
I
ahead.
wanted to also to go over some of the things we discussed in the meeting to the full board so they know a little bit more about what that resolution entails.
Okay, great. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, when we talked about the third-party administrator, the discussion was to advertise for solicitations, and we did begin to do that beginning February. We began to advertise in the 3 publications, La Gaceta, Florida, and the Tribune, solicitations. We advertise those on a monthly basis for upcoming solicitations.
Thank you.
Any questions, sir, at all, or?
No, again, just read over some of the things that we discussed so they know what they,
Great, thank you, sir. Anyone else?
I'd like to move approval.
I'm sorry, what, ma'am?
I'd like to move approval.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Councilman Schisler. Roll call, please.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
no.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
No.
The motion passes 10 to 2.
Great. Next, we move to Section 5B. Any questions in that regard or presentations? Or, 3B. I keep on saying 5. I apologize. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
do we need to have a motion to waive board policy that says that we're not supposed to be taking official action during a special meeting, or is this covered?
This is covered because when we set the special meeting, we just reset all of the items from the previous meeting onto this meeting, so it is part of the special meeting agenda.
So we can take action on any item today then?
Any of the items that are on the agenda, you can take action on.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any questions on 3B?
I'll move approval.
Okay. We have another motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Councilman Schisler. Roll call, please.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
No.
The motion passes 11 to 1.
Great. Next, we move to number 4, a discussion item. Mr. Smith?
Good afternoon. Some of what I heard reminds me of a quote from Mark Twain, which is, "The rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. We do not know whether Ms. LeGrand is in trouble yet. We need to find the facts. We need to evaluate the facts, and we need to decide what that means." So that's the first time I'll caution you in that regard. Please make sure you hear all of the evidence, weigh all of it carefully. Make sure Ms. LeGrand has an opportunity to be heard before you make any determinations in that regard. So today, we're going to hear the results of the CEO investigation by Attorney David Adams. As you may know, he is outside labor and employment counsel for HART, obtained pursuant to a competitive procurement. It's important to note at the outset that he has received significant additional information since the last time we met. Specifically, Mr. Adams informs me that he's had the opportunity to speak directly with Ms. Terry Wright and has, of last week, had an interview with Ms. LeGrand. Subsequent to receiving this additional information, Mr. Adams had opportunity to follow up, verify, confirm, and rebut what he heard in order to make determinations as to what he thought was the accurate description. He has an outline and related source documents that he will provide you today. I'm sure you will pay careful attention to what he says. But bear in mind, you will be able to ask questions to make sure you understand what it is exactly he is saying and that you have clarity in regard to what he is saying. Again, I would caution you not to prejudge. I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but that's an important issue. The issues to make sure that you provide Ms. LeGrand an opportunity to be heard. That's the due process requirements that are essential to these kinds of proceedings. The meeting has not obtained or does not have a notice of action. So there is not going to be action from this board today. What you will do, if anything, is make a motion to have something put on the agenda at the next board meeting, but there will be no action today. And that's appropriate because, again, that gives Ms. LeGrand an opportunity to be heard and, if necessary, supplement the record. Ms. LeGrand may wish to be heard today. That's her option. And if she does, she may be able to obtain or answer questions that you might have. Again, I'm sorry to reiterate, but I want to make sure we know there's no final decision being made today. The potential for final action can be noticed for next week, and again, it could be continued from next week. So there's no guarantee this will proceed apace, but it will proceed as quickly as the process allows. It is my understanding that Mr. Adams' presentation will take about 20 minutes on workplace culture issues and about 10 minutes on the Terry Wright situation. He has a presentation on systemic issues, which you may want to defer. We all are aware of the current pending legislation in which the future of HART is up for discussion. And for that reason, you may want to defer your analysis of systemic changes because it is not entirely clear what kind of system you might be monitoring in the future. For that same reason, Julia Mandel and I are recommending that you defer the discussion on the general counsel position because you may know a lot more in the future and it may inform your ability to decide what to do. So without further discussion from me, other than to warn you to please hold your decision-making until you have all the evidence, I'll let Mr. Adams present to you what he has found during his investigation.
And Mr. Smith, if I may, before that, would you suggest that we vote, if at all, on deferring the systemic issues at this time before he gets into his presentation, or should we take that up when that part comes?
You can do it either way. If you wish to defer, you can have that discussion now and defer the systemic so he won't report on it. So at some point, you need to inform him before he goes into that. So either now or after he finishes the first two parts of his presentation.
Any thoughts, board members? Okay, we'll just play it as it lays.
I'm
Yes,
just reticent to do anything now about deferring it. And I kind of think, despite what's going on in Tallahassee, that I would like to hear that part. But
okay. We'll get to it then upon advice of counsel when it comes. That's good. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and board members. My name is David Adams. I am outside employment counsel for HART. I'm here to describe the three things I was assigned to, which are to describe the leadership culture of the CEO, the dual employment of Terry Wright, and if you so choose, to discuss systemic employment problems that have been identified. So let me go ahead and jump into it. It'll take about 30 minutes, I think, when we're all done. If I could ask people to hold questions until I'm done, then I'm happy to cover anything. This board found out in May 25th that a number of administrative employees left HART, and some of them claimed it was a toxic workplace. Between March 25th and the current time, additional bad news came out, specifically that Terry Wright, oh, thank you. Additional news, I'm sorry, came out that Terry Wright also was suffering from dual, or had dual employment. Hang on just a second, I'm sorry, let me see if I can get this whipped into shape, thank you. thank you. So let me tell you what I did. I performed interviews of approximately 50 current and former employees. I reviewed a lot of HR information and personnel files on the people that I interviewed. I requested and evaluated thousands of documents related to HART operations. I looked closely at severance agreements, payroll information, and I reviewed board policies, employee handbooks, and applicable statutes. Lastly, last week I did a substantial interview of CEO LeGrand because I thought it was important to make sure we had her side of the story also. I basically found three findings with respect to the culture. I found lack of effective leadership, I found poor organizational morale, and I found significant turnover. First of all, as you know, APTA evaluated the organizational culture and generated a report in September of 2021. This report, as you know, was held from the board for approximately a 1-year period because it had some bad news about the organizational culture. My findings really mirror a lot of the same things that were related to the APTA report. At one of the prior board meetings, there was some concern that the APTA report was designed to discuss the prior administration. And I'd like to clarify that this report was not for the prior administration, it was for this administration. And I am having a tough time with this thing.
Let's share, and we're actually going to share screen 1 and minimize this. And there you go.
Great, thank you. And so anyway, as you see at the bottom half of the slide here, it clearly states the peer review is focused on the understanding the current state of the organization. And by the time this had been issued, CEO LeGrand had been in office for approximately 9 months. The APTA observations, I'll just run through, but they're consistent with what I've found, that there was a lack of consistent leadership, a lack of institutional processes, a lack of communication, and that many of the people who were in the management structure seem to be in the dark about the overall leadership. Prior to CEO LeGrand coming in, there was a strategic plan, and it was generally done every year. And there hasn't been a strategic plan in the last 2 years. And you can see from this, this one was done by the interim CEO. It's designed to drive employee engagement and for people to understand what the goals of the organization are and how to do those. This is an example of the strategic plan that has clear goals as to what is supposed to happen. This goal in the upper left-hand corner you can see deals with customer experience, specifically vehicle availability. As you can see in the middle of the slide, it says 85% of the total fixed route fleet are available for service each day, which exceeds pullout by 5%. The idea being here, if you have 100 buses and your pullout's 80 buses, you want to have at least 5 extra buses so that if there's a mechanical failure, it doesn't affect your routes and your service and your planning. To the left, you see the owner of this task was maintenance. People who helped with it were IT, human resources, and operations. And then they listed metrics and things that people were supposed to do in order to achieve these goals. Failure analysis monthly, streamlined preventive maintenance, recruitment campaign for maintenance personnel, review of tow-ins and common issues that are resulted to tow-ins. So everybody knew from the top of the organization all the way to if you were a laborer in the maintenance organization, what you're supposed to do and how you were supposed to achieve your goals. This lack of leadership has resulted in a lot of turnover. This is an exit interview from Greg Bracken, who was a 21-year employee at HART. He says at the bottom of the slide, there's been comments about operating in silos previously. That was nothing compared to the current environment. No communication at all from the CEO down to the employees. Mass exits of staff and inability to bring in replacements has further eroded the morale of those who are still here. Even new hires brought in are starting to leave, and it goes on. I also reviewed a meaningful exit interview from former employee Donnie Murray. He had 4 points that he made that I think are meaningful. First of all, lack of direction. No goals or strategic plan in over a year, little to no tracking of metrics or key performance indicators, wasting time on a vision instead of a real strategy. Number 2, poor prioritization. Focus on appearance rather than substance of service. Example, good schedules and frequencies are more important than bus wrapper advertising or QR codes on business cards, wasting time and resources on finding a different boardroom. 3, lack of accountability, accepting responsibility as to why employees are leaving, continually putting blame on external factors while A combination of long-term and new hire employees have left for the same reason of dissatisfaction with the CEO mishandlings. 2 service planners, service director, legal director, 2 marketing directors, CFO, COO, ADA director, and 2 accountants. And lastly, just a lack of general tools that are needed to do the job. Lack of processes, database, warehouse, SOPs, trainings, and disarray of continually changing processes. Now, some of that Ms. LeGrand inherited, don't get me wrong, but this is how people are feeling, and this is what we're seeing. Let me jump to poor organizational morale. Ms. LeGrand meets with her executive team once a week on Monday. These are primarily the chiefs. She also meets with the leadership team once a week. The leadership team includes the chiefs and the directors. The directors and the managers are subject matter experts who execute the daily transit functions. Examples are operations, maintenance, planning, scheduling, safety, and security. If these subject matter experts at times express a strong opinion or challenge CEO LeGrand, there's often the retaliation according to the interviews I conducted. Retaliation usually goes as follows. The offensive employee gets isolated. The administration refuses to share key information with them. They refuse to communicate with the person. They ignore the chain of command and contact the offensive employee's subordinates for information. Several people told me they heard Ms. LeGrand make the statement, "I don't fire anyone. I just wait for them to walk out the door." Unfortunately, this fits the isolation strategy that I've identified above. Ms. LeGrand can be abusive in meetings. She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't cuss, but she can be intensely difficult. Some of the quotes that I've received from people were, "Be quiet. No one asked you about that." When managers report on their efforts, CEO LeGrand often says, "Who told you to do that? I didn't tell you to do that." She harshly criticizes leaders in front of subordinates. CEO LeGrand sometimes cuts people off while they're speaking, and leaders report that they feel demeaned, disrespected, and embarrassed. Leaders are afraid to speak up for fear of reprisal. No one knows what they can or should do for fear of being attacked. The organization suffers because no one wants to upset the CEO, and so many people don't communicate. I've received some positive comments from some of the newly hired chiefs, so it's not all bad news, but the vast majority of comments follow the ones above. The consequences of these behaviors has been that there's been incredibly high employee turnover. The conduct has created uncertainty in the organization. People are afraid to speak. There's an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. Employment decisions are last minute, haphazard, which creates more uncertainty. For example, let me tell you about Lena Pettit. Lena Pettit joined HART in 2002. Over a 20-year career, she started as an administrative assistant and went all the way up to chief of policy and performance. She worked successfully for 11 CEOs at HART. Ms. Pettit's duties were to manage board relations, supervise government relations, manage HART's policies and statements of procedures. She worked on the annual strategic plan, and she managed public records. Ms. Pettit started to get into trouble when she was trying to execute a public records request. She was scolded when she asked the CEO for a copy of her calendar that was requested in a request. Ms. Pettit was told by the CEO, and I quote, "You're being too transparent." There's no question CEO LeGrand does not like public records. There's multiple instances of people telling me, "Don't write things down, otherwise it creates a public record." Thereafter, the public records function was taken away from Ms. Pettit and given to another employee. When Ms. Pettit tried to devise the annual strategic plan, she was asked, "Who told you to do that?" And as a result, the work on the plan stopped. In the fall of 2021, Ms. Pettit was demoted by the CEO and stripped of her chief title. She was transferred to the legal department, and her board responsibilities were taken away. In January of 22, Ms. LeGrand transferred Ms. Pettit to the Safety and Security Department on 21st Avenue as an admin. Ms. Pettit amazingly kept her chief salary of roughly $145,000, which was considerably more than the director that she reported to. This is yet one example of many pay disparities or pay equities that existed in the organization and were a problem in the HR department. Second, Nikki Freni. Nikki Freni was hired by the CEO as the Director of Marketing and Communication. She had a lot of experience. Her job was to interface the CEO and HART with the media. Unfortunately, there were a lot of disagreements between the two of them, and Ms. Freni resigned at the end of March 2022 with a 5-page scathing letter written to Ms. LeGrand. The letter started out like this. It's often said that people quit bosses, not jobs. After 3.5 months of Director of Communications and Marketing for the Hillsborough Transit Authority, I tender my resignation due to the hostile work environment and toxic culture you have single-handedly created. Your blatant disrespect for me and my position and the emotional distress you have caused me, my last day will be April 1. Ms. Frenny told me that she hand-delivered this letter to CEO LeGrand and Terry Wright, who was also copied on it. CEO LeGrand claims that she never saw the letter or received it. There's no record of the letter ever making it into the personnel file of Nikki Frenny. The letter's been the subject of 4 separate public records requests. Terry Wright told me that she handed the letter to CEO LeGrand, who promptly handed it back to her, and then Ms. Wright read the letter out loud to Ms. LeGrand in her office. The letter that was never received happened to have a demand for 3 months of severance, as you can see from the top paragraph. It also suggested that it would be best for Ms. LeGrand and for everyone else if they could settle this issue and walk away with everyone's reputation intact. With respect to the severance demand that no one ever saw, Nikki Frenny received exactly 3 months of severance, 480 hours at $70.67. She also received a sick payout of $1,000 and was able to cash in on 160 hours of vacation. The vacation wasn't earned. As you may recall, Ms. Frenny only worked for 3 months. Yet HART paid her out $48,000 for a resignation and no legal demand or otherwise. There was also no severance agreement for Ms. Frenny. This is some communication between people in HR. You'll see it starts at the bottom. I pulled Nikki's file and didn't see a severance agreement. Did you receive anything? HR Director Dunnigan says there was no severance agreement that I'm aware of. She resigned. Well, that normally makes sense. When people resign, you don't need severance agreements. But when you pay $48,000 to a person, you should at minimum get a severance agreement and probably a release. So with respect to Nikki Frenny, all I can tell you is that the letter was scandalous. It eventually did end up in the newspaper. There's evidence that Ms. LeGrand saw the letter but did not preserve it. The severance paid to Ms. Frenny violated HART policy and state law, which limits the amount of severance that can be paid to a former employee. And the lack of a severance agreement adds additional suspicion to these events. Bobby Edwards. Other employees have complained about the CEO LeGrand's abusive treatment. Last month, Director of Transportation Bobby Edwards filed an EEOC charge alleging workplace harassment for not allowing me to talk when asked for feedback on any topic. Now, it's not unusual for an organization this size to get EEOC charges from time to time. But what is unusual is that someone this high up in the organization would bring an EEOC charge and specifically call out the CEO. Lastly, there's significant turnover at HART, which is a result of the other things that I've discussed. On November 9th, 6 people were laid off by the CEO. Wanda Dunnigan, the Director of HR, Chandra Span, the Senior Manager of HR, Kimley Green, the Director of Customer Service, Jose Marquez, the Director of Safety and Security, Lena Pettit, which we've discussed, and Yelise Feliciano. The same day, the Deputy Attorney at HART with a 13-year career resigned, and Chief Strategy Officer Kessie Dorner had resigned during the prior week. The timing of these layoffs was suspicious. All of these positions had been budgeted for the full fiscal year, which started on October 1. We were only 1 month into the year on November 9th. Some of these people had run-ins with CEO LeGrand and believed they were being laid off in retaliation for challenging her. Yelise Feliciano told me that she went to a town hall meeting approximately 3 to 4 weeks prior to the layoff. In the town hall meeting, they encouraged people to say, "What are you struggling with at HART? Tell us how you feel." She discussed a pay equity issue. She was a manager of trainers, people who train new bus drivers, and she explained that there was a pay equity issue. She was having trouble recruiting these people. This was her one and only communication with CEO LeGrand, and yet 2 or 3 weeks later, she found herself on the chopping block for a layoff. Now, I did talk to Ms. LeGrand about this, and I asked her about these layoffs and had there been a plan for layoffs, because at around the same time, this is when the transportation referendum failed. And so I asked IT to help me see if there was any information. And you can see here's the response. Mr. Adams, I've done an extensive search through the email of all our local files, including executive, legal, HR staff, local computers, In all cases, I was unable to find documents that have any reference to the people listed below and were never selected for layoff, or any other documents prior to the layoffs that suggested there would be layoffs. I'm not saying Ms. LeGrand and her team didn't have plans for a layoff or who to lay off, but what we can say is that none of this was written down. This is the HART organizational chart as of September 30, 2021. As you can see, the board's at the top, Ms. LeGrand's kind of below that. And then in the middle, where the line is drawn, you see the key employees, the Director of Risk and Legal Services, Chief of Policy, the Director of Safety and Security, Terry Wright, Chief Customer Experience Officer, Mr. Drainville, and CFO Kirk. About 12 months later, by the time I got hired to do this job, this is what that organization chart looked like. These were all the people who had either quit or left or had been demoted. And the most important ones are the ones, again, in the middle by the line. As you can see, other than Ms. Kirk, who's the CFO on the far right-hand side where it says PT, Scott Drainville is the only chief left standing. And with respect to Ms. Kirk, the CFO position had turned over twice. Cindy Stiglich was fired a month after Ms. LeGrand came in, and Joanne Caceres served in the position for 2 months. Now, Ms. Kirk serves in the position in a part-time status, and as I think most of you know, she lives in Ohio and basically works remotely. Ms. Kirk's very, very, very thoughtful, and she's very qualified for the job, but she does only work on a part-time basis. The rest of these people have either quit or been demoted, which has generated substantial organizational disruption. In addition to that disruption, there's been a financial cost of the turnover. A lot of money's been paid to these people related to severance. So on the left-hand side, you'll see I have the 6 people who were part of the layoff, plus Nikki Frenny, plus Terry Wright, which I'll get to later. If you follow this chart all the way across to the right-hand side, you'll see that over $526,000 of severance has been paid to the people who've been asked to leave or who have resigned. Additional to that, the column next to the total paid has health insurance continued. As you can see, several people's health insurance has been continued to the end of this month, some till April and some till May. I don't know what health insurance costs, but I don't suspect that it's cheap. So there's a cost to this in addition to the disruption of the organization. So to wrap up my findings on the CEO, I believe Ms. LeGrand has created an environment of fear and intimidation. The CEO's behavior has caused abnormal turnover. Agency communication is terrible because people are afraid to speak up. And last-minute layoffs, quits, and severance packages are expensive and violate HART policy and state law, which limits the amount of severance that can be given to government employees. So let me switch gears and talk about the dual employment of Terry Wright. Prior to working at HART, both CEO LeGrand and Terry Wright worked at New Orleans Regional Transit Authority, which I'll sometimes call NORTA. Terry Wright was the Director of Customer Service, and CEO LeGrand was a contractor with TransDev, providing transit consulting services for about 3 years from 2016 to 2019. As you know, Ms. LeGrand was hired by the board in January of 2021. Terry Wright was hired by the CEO about a month later in February. She was the Chief Customer Experience Officer. Terry Wright was assigned to the office next to Ms. LeGrand, which demonstrated that she was a key employee at HART. Her responsibilities were broad and deep. As you can see, she touched virtually every operating part of the organization, going from left to right: safety, security, fleet maintenance, facilities maintenance, inventory control, transportation, which is buses, operations, which is buses, paratransit, customer experience, streetcar operations, and service development. Terry Wright was essentially the gatekeeper for Ms. LeGrand and all other management. There was a broad consensus from many people that you could not enter CEO LeGrand's office unless you first discussed the matter with Terry Wright. Terry Wright was Ms. LeGrand's right-hand person. Little to nothing happened at HART without Terry Wright's approval. There was also a consensus that Terry Wright worked hard. She was tough but fair. There's no question that she managed the day-to-day operations of HART, and she essentially functioned as the COO. Terry Wright did not work remote. She came to work, she attended meetings, and she regularly met and communicated with Ms. LeGrand. There's a broad consensus that Terry Wright gave up her Tampa apartment and moved back to New Orleans on April 8th, 2022. There is a significant conflict in the investigation as to why Terry Wright returned to New Orleans. CEO LeGrand says one story, and I have a completely diametrically opposed story from Terry Wright as to what happened. So let me present them for the board's consideration. I interviewed Ms. LeGrand last Monday on March 20th, and Ms. LeGrand told me that Terry Wright requested to work remotely in order to care for her sick mother in New Orleans. CEO LeGrand approved Terry Wright's request to work remotely in her current position, saying, look, family comes first. If your mother's sick, please go take care of her. I'm happy to accommodate you. According to CEO LeGrand, Terry Wright never disclosed her NORTA employment to the CEO in spring of 2022. Now, since there was kind of a conflict in the evidence, I try to go below the surface and look for documents and look for other testimony that supports things one way or another. So again, I asked that a search be done of the computer records at HART. And you can see I said, good morning, Dexter. I need a search for emails or other documents between March 30 and April 11th as to whether Ms. LeGrand and Ms. Wright had any communication about Ms. Wright beginning to work remotely in April of 2022, or Terry Wright's mother being sick and Terry having to move back to New Orleans to care for her sick mother. At the bottom, you can see that the search resulted no results. Again, it doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it just means that nothing was written down about this and nothing was in her personnel file. Terry Wright has a completely different story. In March of 2022, Terry Wright accepted a job in New Orleans. She was done with HART based on the interview she gave me, and she was going home. The fly in the ointment was that CEO LeGrand found out about Terry Wright's NORTA job before Terry Wright could come and resign from HART. According to Terry Wright, a vendor told CEO LeGrand about her new NORTA employment at a March 2022 conference. They met, and according to Terry Wright, CEO LeGrand said it would make her look bad if Terry Wright resigned because of the other high-profile resignations. CEO LeGrand asked Terry Wright, according to Terry Wright, not to resign and approved the dual work at NORTA so long as Terry Wright did not announce her HART resignation. Again, I tried to do some investigating and searching to find out, which of these stories made more sense and which one I could understand. So the first thing I did is get the personnel file, Terry Wright, from New Orleans. She was offered a job on March 3rd. It did have a start date of April 11th, which is a couple of days before she left. And so that provided some credence to Ms. Wright's story. I also looked for whether there was a conference, because Ms. Wright said that she learned, that the CEO learned about her new employment at a conference. And sure enough, on April 30th, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that there was an APTA high-speed rail conference in Philadelphia. So that added some credence to Ms. Wright's story. I also looked at high-profile quits. There were 3 of them. On March 14th, we talked about Greg Bracken, Director of Operations Support, resigned to work for PTSA. On March 17th, Jeremy Beasley, the Director of Legal Services, resigned without notice. On 3/23, we've talked about Nikki Frenny, the Director of Communication and Marketing, who verbally resigned after 3 months on the job. So that added some credence. But the most compelling item is an email that Ms. LeGrand received from Terry Fisher at Insight Strategy. It states, "Hi, Adelie, would you be available to connect about what's happening with the board retreat? I know this is a priority for you, so it is for me too. I'm sorry to hear that Terry is no longer at HART. Carlita bumped into her at NORTA." Now, if this didn't put the CEO on notice that there might be trouble in paradise with the remote work program, then I don't know what would have. Now, keep in mind, the CEO had close ties with NORTA because she worked in the NORTA system for 3 years. She could have picked up the phone, she could have called the CEO, could have called HR, and gotten to the bottom of this quickly. And this is on May 3rd, approximately a month after the remote work agreement. On the other hand, Ms. LeGrand tells us that she didn't learn of the dual employment until October. Ms. LeGrand says that she learned about Terry Wright's dual employment at an October 22 APTA conference. At the conference, NORTA board member Fred Neal was making introductions to people. Commissioner Neal stated in passing that he had, open quote, he had stolen Terry from Tampa, confirming that Terry Wright was in fact working at NORTA. CEO LeGrand claims that she was very surprised by this disclosure. As a result, they went back to Tampa, and Ms. LeGrand met face-to-face with Terry Wright on October 17th, 2022. This was a HART committee day. Per CEO LeGrand, Terry Wright denied working at NORDA. Ms. LeGrand put Terry Wright on part-time status while she investigated the dual employment. Again, it seems you would have been able to get to the bottom of this fairly quickly, but she commenced an internal investigation. Regardless of whose story you believe, whether it's Ms. Wright or the CEO's, Ms. LeGrand withheld material adverse information from this board. The dual employment was disclosed to CEO LeGrand at an APTA conference no later than October 13, 2022. Chair Kemp attended the APTA conference, yet the CEO did not tell her about the dual employment of Terry Wright. On October 17th, HART had a committee meeting, yet CEO LeGrand did not tell the committee chair, Melanie Williams. The full board again met on November 9th, yet CEO LeGrand did not tell the full board. Instead, this board found out about the dual employment of Terry Wright the same way I did, by reading about it in the newspaper in a story by Olivia George. There are other problems with the Terry Wright situation. CEO LeGrand really should have immediately placed Ms. Wright on suspension pursuant to HART policy and practice. Instead, as she tells me, she was placed on part-time employment for nearly a month. When the allegations were confirmed, CEO LeGrand should have fired Terry Wright. Instead, CEO LeGrand let Terry Wright resign effective November 7th, 2022. Here's the resignation letter. Ms. LeGrand, this letter informs you of my resignation as Chief Customer Experience Officer. She goes on to explain that it'll be effective November 7th. That's approximately 3 weeks after she learned of the dual employment. You might say, well, what's the difference? Who cares if she resigns versus gets fired? Well, I'll tell you. The difference is that she got $23,000 in accrued vacation after she was working for both sides. Had she been fired, HART policy would not have permitted her to be paid the $23,000 in vacation. Ultimately, on November 18th, 3 days after the newspaper story broke, the CEO made a disclosure to the committee meeting as to what happened. And I think that's meaningful and for the board to hear it.
As you all know very well, I was hired to lead HART in a new direction and to help it overcome its troubled past. And I feel that we're making good progress. I don't want anything to disrupt our momentum, and I welcome this outside investigation. I think it is the appropriate next step. The public needs to know that we operate beyond reproach and that they can trust us with the highest level of integrity. If the community has questions, we need to give them answers. Our community members need to know that they can trust HART and its leadership. I was beyond reproach. I was beyond disappointed and disturbed to hear that a member of my team was simultaneously working in New Orleans. She violated my trust in a way I didn't even know was possible. As soon as I learned of the possibility of her working 2 jobs, she was put on part-time status while we conducted an investigation. We confirmed she violated the HART employment policy, and I informed her that her tenure with HART was over. This type of deception will not be tolerated by anyone in this agency.
So just to wrap things up, regardless of which story you believe, it seems that CEO LeGrand knew or should have known about Terry Wright's dual employment as early as May 3rd, based on the email. She admits, it's undisputed, and she admits knowing about the dual employment at the latest by October 13th, 2022. CEO LeGrand withheld that information this board for approximately 4 weeks until the clip that I just showed you. She could have disclosed it to Chair Kemp at the APTA conference when she found out on October 13th. She could have disclosed it to Committee Chair Williams on October 17th when she confronted Terry Wright. And she could have disclosed it to the full board at the meeting on November 9th. It's my belief that your CEO has a duty to be candid and honest with at least the board chair, if not with the full board. and it doesn't appear that that happened in this particular situation. So that concludes my presentation. I am available for questions, or if Ms. Kemp desires for me to go forward with the strategic issues, I can do that
Okay.
also.
And thank you very much, Mr. Adams. We really appreciate your presentation and your professionalism and your obvious hard work. So I know we're all really appreciative for that. So, Board, when it comes to the next issue on systemic challenges at HART, we can either hear that or inquire on the issues presented, or kick that off to a following meeting. My personal position is we need to, at the very least, first inquire on questions and comments to this narrowly tailored issue before going there, but I am one of many. So what is the feeling of the board, if anything? Yes, ma'am.
I know I spoke immediately because I didn't want to just pre-decide before we heard this part of the presentation about the next part. I most certainly want to hear the next part, but we have a lot of information that we just had. And I think the next part would be extremely valuable, but maybe not right at this moment. And I'm not, in terms of putting it off because of what's happening at the legislature, I'm not doing it for that reason, because I think it's incumbent, in fact, for us to get that information as soon as possible. I'm just not sure, and perhaps at the next meeting, if that would be good, because I don't want to draw attention away from what we've
Separate
decided
issues.
now. So
Absolutely.
that's where I'm open to hearing whatever, but I do not want to have that lost for months to come at all.
Sure.
I want to make sure that we do deal with the other part as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other thoughts, feelings? And, oh, yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to hear from Ms. LeGrand, attorney, in the comments at this time, before we go any further.
Okay. And Mr. Smith, Ms. Mendel, anything procedurally problematic with that?
No, if he wishes to speak to the board, he's free to do so.
Okay, great, let's do that. Okay, so let me ask you, before we hear from Ms. LeGrand's attorney, what is the consensus of the board in terms of having the systemic presentation done off for next month, or for the next meeting?
A motion to move to a later date.
Okay, and
Second.
okay, and do we need a date specified, or? Oh, for Mr. Smith and Ms. Mandel, do we need a date specified in the motion, or?
I think it would be valuable to have a date specified, that way we know what's coming. And you do have a full meeting next Monday, but you may want to put this off till the
Yeah.
meeting after that.
So would you be amenable to April?
I'm in the
or
motion
May,
to,
I guess?
what's the date?
No, the
What's-
May.
I'm in the
May
motion
meeting.
to move the second presentation to the May hearing.
And what was the date, I'm sorry, sir, that you had? May 1st?
It would be May 1st, and we
Okay.
have heard from your office that you have a conflict,
Yeah, I
and we
was
need to
gonna say.
discuss that after this
Yes.
meeting, if that's okay with you.
Yes, okay, great. So for now, we can do May 1st, and then, and who seconded that?
I did.
Okay, great. Commissioner Knight, motion by Commissioner Wassel, seconded by Board Member Knight. Roll call, please.
Chair Viera,
Yes.
Director Owen,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Director Castor,
Yes.
Director Frazier,
Yes.
Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Kemp,
Yes.
Director Knight,
Yes.
Director Myers.
Yes.
Director Schisler,
Yes.
Director Wolstel.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if Ms. LeGrand's attorney would like to speak, you may, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, is it the position of HART that this is the hearing today to which Ms. LeGrand is entitled under the Constitution?
Just to clarify, this board is not in a position to take any action today, so there'll be an opportunity to provide additional comment and to supplement the record beyond today.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Commissioner Meyer, go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
I'd like to move that we take action at our board meeting in April after hearing all the comments today. At our
Certainly.
April meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Myers, a second by Councilman Schisler. Roll call, please.
Chair Viera,
Yes.
Director Owen,
Yes.
Director Williams,
Yes.
Director Castor,
Yes.
Director Frazier,
Yes.
Director Hudson,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Kemp,
Yes.
Director Knight,
Yes.
Director Myers,
Yes.
Director Schisler,
Yes.
Director Woolstle.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to also make it clear that Mr. Wenzel and his client can have opportunity to be heard at that meeting as well.
Precisely. Thank you, sir. And Mr. Wenzel, just for information, roughly how long do you believe you'll go? We won't hold you to it, but.
We, of course, have not heard about any of this in terms of recommendations or findings, and we have not yet seen it in writing. And we'd like the opportunity to respond in writing. There is substantial evidence to the contrary. The report seems to take the side of everyone and never credits Ms. LeGrand as having been the accurate source of accurate information. We want to put that evidence in front
Sure.
of you all.
And if I may interrupt you, I mean, for purposes of today's speaking, how long do you think you'll need? 10 minutes, 20 minutes?
Oh, I think our position for today is we need to see the written report. There is contrary evidence that is strong and persuasive, and we want to see the written report and put that in front of you before any action is taken.
Okay. And are those the only comments you have today?
I think so.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir. Okay, so next, yes, Board Member Knight, go ahead.
Yes, being all said, with all the information that we receive in due process to our CEO, and we voted before, what is the pleasure of the board, or what our direction as far as having someone else to lead in a capacity where is there anything we can do at this point till next meeting, have someone to take over until we get to all that stuff? It's a lot of information, a lot of things. I'm concerned on the floor of the HART.
Ms. Mendel and Mr. Smith, in response to Board Member Knight's question, may we take action prospectively today on the issue he highlighted?
Because and you all received Mr. Smith's memo on the employment agreement and what it says within the employment agreement, we can't take any action without a resolution in front of you, and that's for any action inclusive of suspension, termination for cause, or termination not for cause. So that would have to be placed on your agenda for the next meeting to have a resolution come forward to you. The due process part of that would be incumbent as part of that analysis in terms of allowing a discussion at your next meeting and a response by CEO LeGrand. But other than you taking an action to place a resolution on the next agenda for the consideration of the three options under the employment agreement, suspension, termination for cause, termination not for cause, that's really the only action you can take today. Certainly, you have the right to ask any additional questions as it relates to what was provided to you as part of the presentation.
And before, I know I have three people that want to speak, I wanted to inquire, the motion that Commissioner Myers made, that would prospectively include our doing that next week, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Yep, so that is answered. Okay, first we have Councilman Schisler, County Commissioner Wassel, then Board Member Upshaw Frazier.
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's no extenuating circumstances with which we could do any action at all today?
Because it was not noticed with the resolution, and because the employment agreement specifically has a condition precedent of acting pursuant to a resolution, you're rather constrained in what you can do. And if you were to decide to want to do something like a suspension, I would caution against that. We're a week away from having full consideration at a full hearing, and there's been no evidence that Ms. LeGrand has interfered in any way in the investigation in the interim. In fact, there's been some comments that for those people that had problems, she's been extremely easier to deal with.
And secondarily, will we get copies of what was presented to us today?
Yes, you will.
Thank you.
And before I go to the Commissioner, Mr. Wenzel, you had a question, sir?
I'm concerned that a lot of careers are affected. The investigator said he'd looked at thousands of documents, talked to 50 employees. we don't have a written report, and we're talking about that a written report will be prepared that will require, no doubt, review of lots of documents and perhaps some interviews of people. And next week is simply not enough time for somebody to prepare a defense to things that have been.
So if I may interrupt you, what I'll do is, because I thought you had a quick question, what I'll do is, sir, is I'll let the commissioner speak, and then if you want to make any comments, based upon those comments you made at that time. So go for it. Commissioner Wassel, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna respectfully disagree with council. This board could absolutely take action if they wanted to, for one, by a simple waiver of policy. This meeting has been noticed. We even allowed public comment, which is surprising in a meeting that is allegedly not going to take action. This board absolutely has the power, I want to be very clear, to take action. I do believe that the other side deserves their opportunity to speak, and I don't believe that anybody is advocating for them to not have to do that. But I believe it would be extremely irresponsible, after what we just saw and heard today, to allow this individual to continue to have the acting power of CEO until we have that public hearing. You have the power to do this if you want to, legally.
Thank you, sir. Board Member Upshaw Frazier, go ahead, ma'am.
2 questions. When are we going to get the written report? And is this the only opportunity we'll have to ask the investigator questions, or will we have another opportunity after we get the report?
So what I've done, I do have a written report, so I have a copy of the presentation that I produced, along with the source documents that were used to, discuss most of these things. And so I have copies for all the board members, which we can distribute out. It's up to the board chair as to, how available I am. I can be at the next meeting, I believe, if necessary, so it's up to the board's pleasure.
If you would, please, I think that would be smart. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Myers, and go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, my question was, too, when are we going to receive the report? And also, if a report can be given to Ms. LeGrand and her attorney today while we're in the meeting, if he has the reports available.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's appropriate.
Okay, just pass the report.
Excuse me. Commissioner Owen, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and I think one thing to also remember is that this issue on suspension with pay was brought before this board. We took votes on that, and I just want to caution this board that, and I labored over this before, that this is exactly what happens, the situation that we're in now, and why it is important whenever something like this goes on that we suspend people without pay, or with pay, because now we find ourselves in a precarious situation. I guess what I would ask counsel for Ms. LeGrand too, and maybe for Ms. LeGrand is, would, in this interim, you all be willing, because I think and I don't want to put words in Commissioner Wostel's mouth, is the possibility to make some type of motion that would be a suspension with pay. Would Ms. LeGrand and counsel want to discuss that for a minute? Would they be willing to unilaterally agree to those terms so that the board doesn't have to take any action?
So if I may, you're asking if they would essentially waive the rules to the extent that they may preclude us from voting to suspend Ms. LeGrand with pay.
Correct.
And that would probably require some a break, et cetera. Okay. Anybody, and did you have any comments to that, counsel, or Mr. Smith or Ms. Mandel?
We would actually like an opportunity to consult, and we can answer that question. So if you just give us a few minutes, we'll step outside and have a consult on that. It's a very important question. We need to be careful.
How about, out of an abundance of caution, since probably good to have you all in the room, let's take a 5-minute break. Would that be good? I always like to have our lawyers here.
Good.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, what? Oh, yeah, of course you may. Please, yeah. God bless you, of course.
Do you all want me to leave the room? This is Ms. Kirk. Do you want me to sign off and come back?
Ms. Kirk, it's a 5-minute break, so if you'll just mute, we'll just come back to it. Thank you.
Okay. I thought they were going into session. Okay, thank you.
So I'll give you one. The same thing I'll give you. This is the last one I have. Thank you so much. You're welcome. Already got it. So, do you still want me to email it to you, because it's right there?
This should be great. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, what do we have to do?
So when you go back here, you're like, this is the end of one. You gotta get one of those stand-up desks. You gotta try to tell me.
Are we gonna roll the presentation? Okay, cool, just making sure. Okay. I agree.
I don't know if we want to go ahead and wait for a couple minutes to see how this is, yes. And for the purposes of just the general meeting, we do also, at the end of this agenda item, we do have Holland and Knight from the legislative perspective on the call. We may still want to have that conversation, but as Mr. Smith has indicated, the discussion regarding general counsel, I would recommend that we put that off, either to your next meeting on Monday or to a subsequent meeting. I think that's something that needs to wait, although just so I can make this statement for everybody's understanding, is there is a series of RFPs and RFQs for legal services.
Wait, if I may, before, do I, because Do I need to make the meeting go back or re-adjourn the meeting formally?
Oh,
Are
I
we
thought,
online?
I thought we went back in. I
No,
apologize.
I don't think so. Are we
Oh,
online?
I came in a few minutes later.
Okay,
I thought
that's
you had
what I was
gone
going to
back
say.
into the
Okay,
meeting.
just making sure you knew. Okay.
We're back into the meeting. I apologize.
No, you're
I
fine.
did believe that we
I'll
had
give
gone
him 2
back.
minutes and then I'll,
Right, right. No, I just wanted to kind of do some cleanup items while we were
I was
in.
like, you sound very formal.
Well, I was taking the opportunity to do cleanup items while we
Yeah.
were working through other issues.
Julia, do you mind checking up on David and Miss LeGrand just so that we can,
I would be happy to. Okay, thank you.
oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Chairman, are we on? Are we back? Oh, we're not, okay.
I just want to see if they need any extended amount of time so that we can do other stuff.
I'm just looking at the amount of presentations that.
Oh, I know.
I'm just wondering if people hear just whatever's legislatively sensitive.
I know. I agree.
I mean, I'm okay.
I agree. I got to bounce at 4, so should be done by then.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Smith asked if you give him a few more minutes and he'll come and write it.
Okay, so let's do this, because I don't like, let's go ahead and re-adjourn if we may.
Yes, our meeting is live. Thank you.
Okay, great, so we're on, okay, so we're back on the record here. The, Ms. LeGrand is, there's apparently some conversations happening. Ms. Mandel, I mean, I operate out of the idea that while we speak about this, Ms. LeGrand and her counsel need to be here, is that correct?
Oh, yes, we cannot
Okay.
discuss that
That's
particular
what I
agenda
thought.
item at this point. So I would, that's what I would recommend is to just, what I was going to discuss
So
was
go ahead.
another one of your agenda items and moving that off of today's agenda, which is the agenda item related to a workshop that I was going to present for general counsel services. I would just recommend and would ask that that workshop be moved, I would suggest right now to the May meeting.
Okay, may we have a
for now.
motion for that?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilman Schisler, second by Commissioner Kemp. Roll, oh, yes. ma'am.
I'd
Go ahead.
also, it just seems as though most of these presentations really are not timely, or I guess we don't have,
Yeah.
but require us to do these today.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering about if more than that can be removed from the agenda. I was surprised to see all this here.
Yeah. mhm. If anyone's in the public, if someone in the public said no, unless if I'm hearing things, please refrain from talking like that, or else you will be asked to leave. Thank you very much. Ms. Mandel, go
The
ahead.
only thing I was going to say is 6A, we do have the Holland and Knight folks on the phone, and I think one of the items we were going to discuss was the pending legislation in
Sure, yeah.
Tallahassee. And so you may want to hold that presentation to have today, as well as what our discussion was per my memorandum.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councilman Schisler, seconded by Commissioner Kemp, with regards to the general counsel report. Roll call, please.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnston?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, now we're back here. I'm sorry.
I'd just like to make another motion
Go
to
ahead.
continue 6B through 6G and not keep
Second.
6A.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Commissioner Wassel. Roll call, please.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Does that include the, I was just trying to see, look over
6A
very
is
quickly.
the federal, we're keeping that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And everything else?
Thank you. Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnston?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. LeGrand and her counsel are back here. So, Mr. Smith and Ms. Mandel, I know you all needed a brief adjournment. If you guys want to make any comments or...
Yes. I also had a conversation with the CEO and her attorney, and what they have offered is the suspension with pay, step aside now with pay until the final hearing is held. However, they would like to have a little more time to prepare for the final hearing, so we would be in the May agenda, not the April agenda. The April agenda is a week away. They've just got the materials now. I'd strongly recommend, in light of the time constraints, that we provide them the full opportunity to gather their evidence and present it to this board at the final hearing at the May meeting. And she'll take suspension with pay immediately, and you then need to get an interim CEO.
Okay, thoughts from board members? Yes, sir. Go ahead, Councilman Schisler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This type of a situation, do we need to wait until the May board meeting? Could we not pull something together for 3 weeks into April or later into April, so that we could focus on this issue and not have to deal with the, again, push reports off that the staff has worked their butts off trying to put together?
Good point.
Would it be possible to do it in a 3-week time frame or something like that?
Your question is a very good question. The answer really depends upon counsel for Ms. LeGrand and how much time he needs. I want to make sure we provide him the opportunity he needs to be heard.
Absolutely.
So if he can be
Absolutely.
ready April 28th or whatever, I'd let him answer that question. Steve?
I'm on the trial docket in Broward County Court for a 5-day jury trial case in the middle of April. Simply going to put too many things on the plate at the same time. I need the time, Mr. Schisler.
But you will be prepared to stick with the meeting in May, whether it's the 1st or the 3rd, depending upon whether it gets rescheduled?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can I?
Commissioner Kemp.
I
And
would
then Ms. Williams.
suggest that we have a special meeting no matter what, not put this
Yeah.
with our
Second.
regular meeting. And maybe it has to be, I know you said a trial and other things, but maybe at the end of April, maybe that some other date could be worked out, but I would not schedule this at a regular board meeting.
I agree. Board Member Williams.
That was my suggestion.
Okay.
I was just to ask for a special meeting for this
Okay.
agenda item.
Any other comments? Commissioner Myers, go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, that we have a special meeting either April 17th, or I move that we have a special meeting April 17th or April 24th. It's up to the board for either day.
Mr. Winslow, can you be available over 24th?
I cannot.
Looks like we'll need, obviously we want her counsel to be here, et cetera. We'd probably need a couple more days for that. I don't think another 4 or 5 days would, kill things.
Available 17th?
Are you available the 17th?
Of April?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
Okay.
I don't think that gives Ms. LeGrand enough time, as I read the cases under the 14th Amendment, for her to be given her full due process rights.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mayor Castor.
I would move that we clearly want to get this done as quickly as possible, so if the council isn't ready and our regular meeting is on the 1st, that we start looking at availability on the 2nd on, just to ensure that we get this as quickly as possible.
Agreed.
I believe he said he'd be available as early as May 1st, but if you want to set a special meeting, you can then have your board liaison talk with the board and find the availability early in May.
Board Member Knight.
Mayor Castor, she's saying May 2nd, and if it is, she make the motion, I'll second.
Okay.
Can we do second?
And you were looking at 1 or 2 days following May 1st?
Right. My motion is as quickly as we possibly can, schedules accommodate following our regular May 1st meeting.
And does that also incorporate the proposal for suspension with pay from now till then, correct?
Yes, and
Okay.
from now until then that we
Okay.
suspend with pay.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a motion by Mayor Castor, seconded by Board Member Knight. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much. Board Member Knight.
Yes, and looking at the organizational chart and some of the experience and that's here and been here a while, my suggestion is Mr. Drainsville can take over, but we need to discuss and see how the board feel as anybody else, but that's my recommendation.
Okay. Any thoughts in response? Commissioner Kemp.
I would very much, I was looking internally to see, at least on an interim basis, and I'll just, I was not going to raise that today, but I had looked and gotten recommendations internally, and I concur that that would be a good interim. Perhaps we could, I'm not sure, counsel, what would you suggest in terms of this? I mean, should we have the chair, or I would,
Well, I think if this board has a consensus, you can just approve Mr. Drainville to step in the interim. Ms. LeGrand has agreed to step aside immediately.
okay. Then I would, I'll make a motion to that effect, because I think that, or I don't know if.
And you can second.
Oh, I'm sorry, you made the
Member-
motion, sorry.
Yep,
I will
it's all
second
good.
your motion. I wasn't sure whether you made the motion or just a suggestion for discussion, but I would concur.
For Scott Drainville. Okay, any thoughts? Board Member Williams, anybody else?
I just want to make sure he's readily available and open to taking on the leadership role.
That's a really good point. Before we draft him.
I know. Yes, it's a surprise, but yes, I'll accept.
We really thank you, sir. I mean, obviously, these are very troubling times on a number of fronts, and we really appreciate your willingness to step out and enhanced additional public service. So we all join in saying thank you and God bless you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Wolstel?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much, Board. Anything else today on the CEO issue? I guess we've pretty much resolved it for purposes of today. Okay, great. Oh, yes, ma'am. Commissioner Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you. Is that when we have our next meeting regarding the investigation? I want to make sure with legal counsel that whatever need to be advertised, resolution, so when we come to the meeting, we're not told what we can do, but what we need to do. So can you explain that? Because today it was, you can't take action, you can't, so the meeting in May, I want the board to understand, and you tell us today, the action that we can take, that meeting, if something need to be advertised, what have you. We'll be ready.
The meeting needs to meet board policies, which means it needs to be appropriately noticed, and then it needs to have, it's a regular board meeting, you can set the agenda. Now, we've got plenty of time to set the agenda for the special board meeting, and it's pretty clear the agenda is going to consider all relevant actions under the employment agreement. So the notice will contain that, and therefore it will be within the scope of what you can decide.
Thank you. I want to be clear from you, so when we
ma'am.
attend that meeting, we don't hear anything any different.
Loud and clear.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Yes,
I
ma'am.
just would like to echo Commissioner Myers' sentiments, and maybe it's around, let's align on what we want to discuss and what the outcome is, and in the event something comes up, then maybe we understand what we can do if this situation happens, and here's the alternate option for us, and having that further dialogue.
I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, but maybe it is,
It
why were
isn't
you
a-
not able to take your action today?
It's not a question, it's just an understanding of our options in the event that we have, if we are moving forward and we get the information that we plan to have, then I want to play it out and understand if it doesn't work out the way we believe it will be, then we maybe look at other options, and I want to be presented with all options prior to the meeting so that we understand going into the session.
We will make sure the notice of the meeting in which you're going to consider this matter outlines all of the options you could possibly legally take. I understand what you.
Thank you.
We don't need to have another deferral.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Irwin, did you have your hand up?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Mayor Castor, go ahead.
I think just to clarify, maybe just for me, but I think for the entire board, what Ms. Williams and Commissioner Meyer are asking for is that if we have to have a resolution for the possibility of termination, then we need to be prepared for that. And, pending Ms. LeGrand's response, that as a board, we want for that option to be available at that special call meeting.
Yes, I understood Ms. Meyer's motion and approved by the board did that.
Yes, it did.
Okay.
So Commissioner Kemp and then Board Member Knight, go ahead.
Well, I was glad for the mayor's clarification because if you remember, having been through this before, we did vote to terminate Mr. Limmer, but then we had to come back again and re-vote on a resolution. So we can make sure that that process doesn't happen again?
I think what you voted on the second time was the severance agreement.
Oh,
There was
so
a
will
release and
that
severance
be-
agreement. You had already voted to terminate him.
Okay.
But there was also an opportunity to negotiate a severance, which is what I believe came back before you, was the severance terms in
Right.
the settlement agreement.
But he wasn't terminated with cause, right? He was allowed to,
Ultimately, he was not terminated with cause. It was a negotiated departure.
okay. So we had a resolution then that we approved. I would like a final, the ability to make a final decision.
We will have a resolution so you can make a final decision. Now, the problem is, what if the other side makes a settlement proposal? There's going to have to be an opportunity to consider that agreement, which only this board can approve.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, Board Member Knight, and then I saw Commissioner Washel. Did you have your hand up, sir?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
I was
great.
turning it off.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And lastly, in reference to the pertaining the council, being that we have voted on to enter in Mr. Drainsville and the CEO suspended with pay, any technical or information pertaining to HART that you have any question, will she be available? We'll make sure.
Ms. LeGrand?
Yes.
That's a very good point. I would assume that she would be available in case if there was anything that, for day-to-day operations?
We did not have that discussion, but I'm sure she would be available to answer any questions Mr. Drainville might have, if he has any.
Okay.
But I'll check and confirm that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very good point. Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Ms. Upshaw Fraser, go
I just
ahead.
have a quick question. I was just looking through the binder that we got here. Is there a written report other than the PowerPoint presentation? Or is this the actual written report that we're getting?
And for Mr. Adams?
It was my intent that this would serve as the report. Now, if you want to have a, 8.5 by 11 typewritten report, that can be arranged, but I think this deals with the issues, frankly, that summarize the investigation.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, we're going to move on to the chair's report. Before, I just wanted to make the note to thank all board members, because this is not an easy process, and our counsel, Ms. Mandel and Mr. Smith, really stressed that we try to be as consistent as we can with due process, et cetera, not coming to conclusions. And I think everybody did a great job. So I just wanted to just say that, because it's on things like this, you have to talk rhetorically in a way where you dot all your I's, you cross all your T's, and you make sure that you stay in line. I think everybody did a great job. So, and I know we all have an open mind and an open heart with anything that may happen. Yes, ma'am.
The other thing, and we didn't handle this initially when we've done, I hate to have this much experience with this, but
Sure.
we didn't do this initially in the other meetings. The interim, Mr. Drainville accepted it in an interim basis, but we didn't deal with or allow for a negotiation of some increase in salary, which I'm sure, I don't know, what he gets now, but I'm sure would be appropriate under the circumstances. So maybe we could have, if I could make a motion to allow the chair to deal with that and the interim, and maybe.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Councilman Schisler. Roll call, please. And any comments on the motion? Okay, go ahead.
Chair Viera?
Yes.
Director Owen?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes.
Director Castor?
Yes.
Director Frazier?
Yes.
Director Hudson?
Yes.
Director Johnson?
Yes.
Director Kemp?
Yes.
Director Knight?
Yes.
Director Myers?
Yes.
Director Schisler?
Yes.
Director Woolstle?
Yes.
The motion passes
Thank
unanimously.
you. Thank you very much. Commissioner Irwin, go ahead, sir.
Counselor.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was, okay, and then Councilman Schisler.
You had mentioned about a possibility of a settlement proposal is made in the meantime. Couldn't we just address that prior to the special meeting on the 2nd? Or you had mentioned that Ms. LeGrand could make a possible settlement, which I would expect to happen. And if that happens, would we just address that on the day of the meeting? Because that would be our only choice, because I wouldn't want to call another special meeting prior to. So I guess I just want to know what you think on your procedure on that.
The answer is yes, if we can get everything drafted in time as well.
Okay, thanks.
Councilman Schisler.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In light of the revelations and the information that's been presented to the board today, and the fact that Ms. LeGrand has self-suspended herself, if you will, and Mr. Drainville, rightly so, has been appointed as interim, I'd like to stress to the staff, to all up and down, from the chiefs all the way down to the drivers, the operators, everybody all up and down. You have our support. We ask you for your patience. We know this has been trying for you, and you've lived through this issue. So we ask you to keep at it, keep doing the great job that you are doing, and we will all get through this as a unit. There's some pretty rough information coming out today, and more potentially on the horizon. But just hang in there. You have our support, and we ask you for your support, and we'll all get through this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp.
And I know we didn't discuss Mr. Drainville's background much, and I know board members here understand that he is Director of Operations and Maintenance. Is that correct? And Mr. Drainville, just for the record, for the public, for the board, for everyone, I think HART has some 800-plus employees, and you're now director and manage a about 650 of them, is that
So
correct?
I'm the chief of transportation and maintenance, and I oversee just about 90% of the employees, bus operations, maintenance facilities, streetcar. And I've been in transit 30-plus years. I started from the bottom, worked myself all the way up. I've worked with multiple transit agencies. I've been assistant general manager in the past, so I feel I'm well qualified to step in.
Okay. I just wanted that to be clear for our board and for everyone that hears this, because, I asked a few people and just tried to get some sense of, in many different venues, how, your management, and people were very, they were very complimentary about it and felt that you did well. So I just wanted to have the public, the staff, everyone assured of that.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Wassel, go ahead, sir.
Have we missed any way of empowering you that you feel like you need before we wrap up?
No, not at this time, no.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Okay, great. And I wanted to echo as well, before I do the chairperson's report, what Commissioner Schisler, or what Councilman Schisler said, and very, very well said. I'm so glad you brought that up. I've been meeting a lot with HART employees a couple of times, and I've committed to them on doing community meetings and town halls about once a month, because I just think it's so important, because they feel these are, hardworking men and women, many of whom live paycheck to paycheck and work like hell for that paycheck to paycheck, and they feel like they're in the middle of just a lot of turmoil, and this isn't the first time, obviously. So but they're not used to it. You know what I mean? Let's just put it that way. So very well said in that regard. I wanted to, for the chair's report, speak about, I'm going to be going on Thursday to Tallahassee. Obviously, there was legislation filed for a study by State Senator Burgess and State Representative McClure that would look prospectively, as presently written, on the studying the dissolution of HART. And I wanted to get board members' feelings, obviously not on the dissolution of HART. That's just not, obviously not something we're going to support, I would gather. But in terms of just thoughts, ideas, et cetera, when I talk to our friends in Tallahassee on that, I mean, my thoughts are that it's important to not overreact to this. Which is, if we take it as, number one, obviously take the issue of dissolution of HART, the issue of prospectively attacking our revenue source off the table, and we say, look, there are obvious issues in HART that we can address, and if folks in Tallahassee or state representatives, FDOT, et cetera, have solutions for that, we should have an open mind and an open heart, obviously. That's why I'm going. I'm going because, again, there's always room for bridge building, and I think that's something that's so important. I mean, heck, today we just took a significant move over here as a board that calls a number of transparency-related issues on HART. So I think we have to have an open mind on a lot of issues, again, without fatally undermining the mission of HART. I think that's important. So just briefly, did anybody have any thoughts to share? Or yes, sir.
I just, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder the reasoning behind this. Ostensibly, the original bill, both bills, were proposed to look at the efficiencies of consolidation of PSTA and HART together. But then, was it Thursday, a week ago, it was amended to drop PSTA out of the equation and just simply go with dissolution of HART.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand the rationale. I don't understand the initiative for it. What drove the whole question to come into play to begin with? And that, I think, is very, very important, because there's an awful lot of stakeholders out there. It's not just the board. It's not you have how many countless riders, 1 million riders last year. This is very, very important to people getting around. Somebody would have to pick up the service, and I believe that it creates too much of a vacuum in the whole process. And there's an awful lot at stake, and I think that a lot of care and due diligence needs to be had in making this decision. And it seems to me it's too quick on the draw. That's all.
And I agree with your sentiments, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going, which is to ask the question, why are you doing this? Which is, what is your intent? A lot of times, just in human relationships, when somebody takes an action that may be a little caustic, there's a reason behind it, and maybe they didn't either mean to be so caustic, or maybe there was a message behind the caustic measure, which is, I want to inquire on what it is. Again, given some of the honest and open challenges we've had with HART over the last several years, continuing to today, and maybe to address some incremental issues with HART, we don't know what it is. But again, another issue is, you talked about the many people that rely on HART. I think it's good to, for example, all be inviting some of our state senators, state representatives, and others to meet with HART employees so that they can talk to the men and women who read about this study and it scares the heck out of them, right? And they can see that, look, these are moms, dads, husbands, wives, et cetera, people taking care of families, many of them living paycheck to paycheck, many of them with 10, 20, 25 years of service to HART, who read something like this and it scares the heck out of them. So they've got to see the consequences, if you will, of putting an issue like that out there while looking at the incremental changes to some more than incremental, significant changes that we do need and may additionally need at HART. So I agree with your comments. Anyone else? You're motioning, go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah. No, I just agree that those comments are well taken, because, we have had issues, necessarily very public, because that's, we are publicly accountable board. In fact, we've done everything we could in the matter of transparency. I will say this, I am very proud of the HART's operations for this whole time, and in fact, improving those operations and very much making sure that we were doing good service, and we used our and I've said it before, our de minimis dollars, such underfunding for this transit agency, but we have used it to very good and very careful effect. We've been very much mindful and watching this, and this is where we've come to. And I will say again, part of the responsibility of those operations has been Mr. Drainville for a good part of those operations. And we have been looking and very concerned whenever we have found out otherwise. It's been one of the actions we've taken. So I have been very proud of our service and everything we've done. I think it's been done well. So I really don't understand, and it does make it difficult in terms of where we're going to be in the future, what our employees, what the community thinks about it. I think it would, if there was any sense of merger or supporting the organization in another referendum, for instance, I think it would be extremely difficult if there was any merger to ever get support through a referendum to better fund this agency. And I don't think, I think the evidence of that is definitely there. So I think we really need to think about the future and what we do here. But I think I'm proud of the board for taking the step that it has today, for taking the steps that it has done when we've moved forward. And I think it's important that we're not destabilized again by having information or having something like that out there when we don't really understand the basis of it, or how you can identify a problem. We can identify a problem, but how do you make it better? That's what, and I don't see the answer.
Thank you, Madam. Board Member Johnson, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. And this is a little bit something that Ms. Mandel and I had talked about at the Strategic Planning Committee a couple of, maybe a week ago. It's been over 3 weeks since this bill has been filed. Mm-hmm. We're in week 4 of session right now. We are so far behind the game on this. And I think that later on, when we start looking at policies in general or how we're going to be doing things, we need to have the ability to be able to go in and talk about this or talk about whatever issues that comes to us in a much more quicker manner than what we're doing right now. And I think that this is a perfect, my opinion, I think, this study is exactly what we need. I think that this study needs to be looked at, or the organization needs to be able to be looked at, and every outside set of eyes that we can get right now, I think is as a good idea as we can have, and, we need to be in front of Representative McClure and Senator Burgess, ASAP. We should have already done this. This isn't something that, we should be talking about today. This is a conversation that should have been happening a long time ago.
Great. Thank you for your thoughts, sir. Board Member Knight.
Yeah, real quick, we used to have a couple of members, even Melendez, I think, represent legislated, and it never was replaced on our board. Do you remember that? Do we have anybody represent?
I don't believe that seat's been filled.
So that would be something too, that being here and can go there and be an advocate for us. We need to think about that as well.
Bless you. Any other thoughts? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm glad you're going. I can't think of anyone better that's respected on both sides of the aisle. I am extremely close with both those legislators. They do a great job, and I guess my only advice would be, tell them what we're going to do different.
Yep.
And why things are going to be different, because they are extremely open-minded folks, so thanks.
Yep, and thank you for those kind words. Yeah, no, I mean, I take this as an opportunity to have a dialogue and to hear folks out, et cetera. Again, a lot of the challenges are very open and obvious, but, you mentioned, Commissioner Owen, bipartisanship, and I want to stress that we have Republicans on this board, we have Democrats on this board who support mass transit, and even though we disagree on certain things, there are certain things that we all want to work together as just public servants to make this organization, this institution better for the people that we serve and for the people who help run it every day. So again, that's where I'm going. But I wanted to hear people out on it in terms of any messages or anything that you want me to bring over, because obviously we can't talk outside of this hearing. Yes, sir.
Okay, I don't mean to belabor the issue, but to your comment, Commissioner Urban, is this a punitive issue? I mean, are they coming down on us for a specific reason? The way the language is written is very open-ended. There's no tree. You hit this point. Okay, we're going to do this, but what happens afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
So is this intended to be punishment because of issues and so forth that HART has had or is experiencing, or do you?
I haven't discussed this with either of them, so I wouldn't know.
Just the way you were wording that.
That
could change your entire
Sure.
approach.
Yeah, and I never want to speculate on adverse intent, et cetera. Again, I want to hear folks out and come to a solution on the obviously challenges that they see, because we work with people, so.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I didn't misread it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to remind you, we do have our lobbyists from Holland and Knight
Yeah.
on the line.
I know,
so
and they're
there
going to
may
be dealing with that.
Well, there may be additional questions that they may be able to answer
Yeah,
as it
and
relates to this
a
issue.
point well made. So let's go ahead and go to 6A, federal and state legislative plans with Holland and Knight.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Barkovic. I'm sorry, Kim is actually stuck in some committee meetings this afternoon, so I'm going to kind of just wrap up what you guys were just discussing. As you know, since our initial discussion that we had with you all, the new legislation was filed by Representatives McClure and Senator Burgess. Those are House Bill 1397 and Senate Bill 1537. And as the chair mentioned, we are arranging meetings right now in Tallahassee for this coming Thursday with the chair to discuss the legislation. So those meetings do include the bill sponsors. So we will be, discussing with them more in depth about the bill, and the purpose is to, just let them know that, we want to weigh in with our information and be a resource to them, but also kind of ascertain where some of this is coming from. So next meeting, Kim Case could have some additional information for you all on that. If you do have any other questions, the bill about the study, the bill provides legislative intent to explore the dissolution or transfer of the governance, staff, operations, funding, facilities of HART with the goal of enhancing regional transit service and connectivity in the Tampa Bay area. The legislature finds that the coordination of transportation planning, especially regional, is critical to the safe and efficient management, operation, and development of public transit systems, considering Florida's rapid population growth. So we'll keep you updated on that. And again, Kim Case, part of our state legislative team, is working on those meetings. And if we can move a couple of slides forward to the federal part. Thank you. So on the federal front, our priorities for HART is funding for the heavy maintenance facility, looking at bus replacements to maintain that state of good repair, bus stop improvements and ADA compliance. As you know, Congresswoman Castor helped secure $5 million for bus stop improvements in last year's FY23 Omnibus Appropriations Bill. We have re-engineered that request for FY24. Those requests were due in the last couple of weeks, and we submitted them not only to Representative Castor, but also to our new Hillsborough County Representative, Congresswoman Laura Lee. Their deadline was last Friday. And so we have those requests in. Just so you know, the timeline, they have to go through all of the requests that they receive. They can only submit up to 15 requests. That's their cap, their limit. And then they'll submit them to the House Appropriations Committee. So we'll know in a couple of weeks whether or not our community project funding requests, also formerly known as earmarks, will advance through that process. Again, given the investigation and everything that's going on, having the support of the board will be very helpful in having these projects pushed forward. And then just the other thing that we're working on is just planning for the future and maximizing the federal funding options that are out there. You know, there are lots of competitive federal grant opportunities through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that's the IIJA, as well as the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And then working on those community project funding requests. The other thing that we have, HART did recently submit was a RAISE grant application for the heavy maintenance facility. We submitted $25 million. The process for the RAISE grant now will go through review at within the Office of the Secretary. They will make grant awards by the end of August. By statute, they have to announce grant awards by August 27th. And so from now until then, having our board, having you all help us advocate for that project will be really important. Next slide. So again, here are these notices of funding that I just talked about. The RAISE Bus and Bus Facilities is due April 13th. Low and no emission also due April 13th. This is a combined almost $1.5 billion worth of federal funding that is available. The other opportunity that just opened up this morning that I think is key for FTA, for you all to submit to the FTA, is there's over $200 million, $213 million to be exact, in emergency funding that HART could apply for as it relates to any of the federally declared disasters that were declared within Hillsborough County over the last 2 years. So as it relates, for example, to Hurricane Ian, and HART paid additional overtime to employees because of the disaster that was declared. I mean, this is a prime opportunity for HART to be submitting an application to seek reimbursement of that overtime that HART was paying for. And then opening later this spring, we have Reconnecting Communities Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program. Next slide. So I jumped ahead of myself. We already talked about the community project funding. This was also referred to as the earmarks. For this year, we did lower our dollar amount of ask. We only asked for $3 million this year because the rules for the process have changed. Last year, the rule was Congress could seek up to 1% of the discretionary budget for providing funding to community project funding. The House this year cut that in half. Only a half percentage of the discretionary budget can be used for community project funding. So with that in mind, and the scaling back of the process on the House side, we just had to kind of reframe our request for our members. And next slide. I think that is it for today. So please just let us know if you have any questions. Happy to take any. And again, just realize on the state front, Kim is the lead on state, so bear with me if you have any questions about what's happening in Tallahassee.
Any questions, comments? Okay, none? Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. We appreciate all your hard work and whatnot. Thank you very much. Okay, so there being none, that concludes for the business for today's meeting, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Well, this was a surprise.